Okay, so I did a video where I show you how to set up sidechaining, but I never really explain what's going on. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. Now I'm going to start with sidechaining already set up, just like it was at the end of the last video, and just take it from there. First, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to choose both of these tracks, and I'm going to change the layout here under Set Track Layout Mixer Panel to Big Meter. That way we can see what's going on in these on the meters here. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about channels in Reaper. Each one of these tracks can have a multitude of channels. Now when you first set a track up, it's just going to have channel 1, 2, and that's just a stereo output, and that's what you're going to hear over here. In fact, the only channel you're going to hear on these tracks being routed to the master is channel 1, 2. So let's take a look at these meters here, because there's some important information in here. Let me mute this, and you can see that there is a stereo track here, 1, 2, and there's a stereo track over here, 1, 2 for the bass. Now remember when we were setting up the routing here, we clicked on this input-output button, and we chose to receive from the kick track. Now, by default, all it's going to do is send over audio 1, 2 of the kick to audio 1, 2 of the bass, and that's what's going on right here. Audio 1, 2 of the kick to audio 1, 2 of the bass. And you can see what's going on here. You're basically just combining the bass with the kick. And of course, this won't work for a sidechain compressor because you need two discrete signals. You need a bass signal, and you need a separate signal, in this case the kick, to trigger the compressor. So what we did is change this to new channels on receiving track 3, 4. And now you can see that that channel is reflected over here in the meters. You can see the bass. The bass is actually pumping now because the sidechain compressor is working. And over here you can see the kick track. And up here in this input-output window, you can see under track channels there are now 4. Now, you can add more track channels if you want to. We don't really need to for the side chaining, but let me show you what that would look like. Let's add, let's add a 5, 6. So now channel 1, 2 from the kick is being sent to 5, 6 on the bass. And over here we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then finally we have 5, 6 over here. I'm going to switch this back to 3, 4, and I'm going to get rid of that extra stereo channel because I don't really want to look at this other meter over here on the kick, but I do want it to send a signal over to the bass. I'm going to send this pre-fader and pull the fader down, and now you can see it's still being sent over, but I pulled the fader down so nothing's being routed to the master. Just kind of cleans things up. Okay, I just want to point out a few things on the compressor here. The redness over here is the gain reduction. You can see that there's a ton of gain reduction going on right now. Over here, this green meter is the signal that's triggering the compressor, and it's the kick drum. So that's why you can see it pulsing up and down. And this right here is the threshold control, and you'll see as I pull it down and it gets underneath the signal that's triggering the compressor, you can see that the gain reduction is increasing. And this over here is the output mix. In other words, this is the bass and how the bass is being pumped. So when I first set this up, I had a hard time connecting this detector input, auxiliary input left and right, which you have to select for the compressor to get the right sidechain signal. I had a hard time connecting auxiliary input left and right with the, let me start this playing again, with this channel 3, 4 on the bass track, which is the kick that we sent over. So let me connect the dots on that. Up here, you can see there's this button here. It says 4 in and 2 out. And what it means is 4 signals are coming into the compressor, 2 signals are going out. Or 2 stereo signals are coming in and 1 stereo signal is going out. So let's click on this and bring it over where you can see it. And you've got two matrices. This is the input matrix for the compressor, and this is the output matrix for the compressor. Just like in the button up here, you can see that there's 4 connections for the input, and there's 2 connections for the output, just like the button says over here. Now down here, I don't know if you can read it, but this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So this 3, 4 right here is actually, let me play this again. It's actually channel 3, 4 over here on our base. And if you look, 3, 4 is connected to auxiliary left and auxiliary right, which is our detector input. That makes a lot more sense that way. Okay, so now let's click on this button here and open up these this connection matrix. And we're going to switch some of these on and off and see how the compressor behaves and see what happens, just for a better understanding of things. So you know right here, this 3, 4 is channel 3, 4 over on the base, which is sent from the kick, and it's being routed to auxiliary left and right, which is our detector input. So if we turn these off, you'll notice over here the detector input signal is gone. And you'll also notice you can't hear the bass being pumped anymore, because without a detector input, without the sidechain input on the compressor has no signal to trigger it. So let's turn this back on. Also, you could disconnect channel 1, 2, the channel 1, 2 input on the compressor, so the compressor won't be sent any bass, in which case you'll get no sound at all, because the outputs of the compressor are still connected to the master. So the master is getting a signal from the output of the compressor, but the compressor doesn't have any signal to work with. So let's turn that back on. You could also disconnect the output of the compressor to the master. Now you'll notice over here on the master, over here, that nothing's being pumped, and you can't hear anything being pumped, but the compressor is still working. That's because it's still getting the detector input here routed in from 3, 4 on the bass track, and it's still getting the bass routed in. So there's no reason for the compressor to stop working. The reason you can't hear it is because it's not being routed. So let's turn that back on. One thing I liked about Samplitude is you can choose more than one source to trigger your sidechain compression. And so I'm going to show you how to do that in Reaper. I've added another kick track right here. And all we do is open up the input-output on the bass, and we'd set up another receives from the second kick. Don't forget to change this to pre-fader, because you'll see our fader's all the way down. If we don't change it to pre-fader, nothing will get routed over here. And then we have to change this to channel 3, 4 over on the bass. So let's play this. And you can see that the bass drum is hitting twice as much, because there's 2 tracks and they're offset. Now if we remove this, let's just delete it, you'll see what happens over here. This meter will just hit half as much. So I'm just going to put this back, change this to pre-fader. We don't have to worry about any of the settings in the compressor, because the compressor is already set up to take this channel 3, 4 as its detector input. So that's sidechain compression explained in more detail in Reaper. Hopefully you're less confused now and not more so. Thanks for watching.